Hello, wonderful humans, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about what I've been reading in January and a little bit at the end of December because I suppose post-Christmas, what I read after Christmas up until now. And maybe a little bit about what I'm planning on reading next, maybe. A little bit of a wrap-up for January, a TBR roughly. I don't necessarily like calling it a TBR for February, and also a little bit of a haul, I suppose, some of the books that I've bought recently. So I'm just going to get stuck into it today. Just after Christmas, the first book I read, I always like to, in that Christmas New Year period, just read some fun books that I've been putting off for a while. And I'll start with Fancy Meeting You Here. It's written by Ali Berg and Michelle Callis, two Australian writers. This is set in the UK. It's about a 30-year-old who thinks about what life could have been. And that seems to be something that's common in a lot of books at the moment. I know I read The Midnight Library last year, and there's been a few others that I've read recently where women particularly, but men as well, are in their 30s, are reflecting back on what might have been. And Evie gets the chance to explore what could have been. And I really enjoyed this book. I would recommend it. A love story that rewrites history is what it's called, what it says down the bottom. It was good fun. It was exactly what I needed. Made me think, but not too much. And given I'm in my early 30s, definitely I related to this character and that desire sometimes to go back and relive some of those choices that we made in our early 20s. But I really enjoyed it, and if you are into that sort of rom-com chick lit kind of stuff, this one is one that I would really recommend. So good fun. After that, or around about the same time, I always have an audiobook on the go as well, just for when I'm going for a walk or at night when I'm trying to get to sleep and can't, I'll put an audiobook on. And I was listening to The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood and narrated by Callie Dalton, sorry. I'm reading it off my notes because I don't have a physical copy of it. This was one of those books I didn't want to buy. I ended up buying it, obviously, as an audiobook, but I just could not stand on the books that I saw in the bookstores, the little fake sticker that said the TikTok sensation, and it put me off buying it. I don't know, has that happened to anyone else, that they've been put off by something that little sticker, that fake sticker that you can't remove, has said? I didn't want to read it because it was a TikTok sensation, but I really enjoyed it. I listened to it, as I said, as an audiobook. It was good fun. Again, rom-com will make a great movie. I'm assuming it will get turned into a movie. Set in academic world, slightly different characters to normal. I can't remember the character name, but the main female is an academic student, a PhD student who is studying science. So in that STEM area, not something that I personally like STEAM. I like STEM to include the arts and become a STEAM, but I really enjoyed a look at the sort of academic world and that falling in love kind of thing in that situation as well. So that was good fun. Again, I would recommend it. Loved the audiobook. I thought Callie Dalton did a really great job of narrating it. So they were the two books that I've read or listened to and read in that gap between Christmas and New Year. I think I read some other things maybe, or I started some of these books that I'm about to talk about, but that was December. So moving forward on to January, and no particular order. I have been reading this. I think I started this in October. The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, book 4 in the Wheel of Time series. If you don't know that I've been reading this, go check out my other videos. I did this as my, obviously, as my Wheel of Time book. And this, I loved it so much. I loved how much it kept me guessing. I loved the character choices that were made. I loved the repercussions that they faced. I loved the relationships unfolding. I really loved that there were things that took me by surprise, and that there were things that I could guess and could work out a lot earlier. Probably the one thing that I would say, I thought that it was a little bit slow getting started, but everything that happened at the start of the book was necessary to set up what was to come, and what I assume is to come in future books as well. So while I thought it was a little bit slow to get started, and it did, that was reflected in how long it took me to read it, plus I was busy doing my minor thesis for my master's degree. I thought this was spectacular, and I think it's always a really good sign of a book in a series for me. As soon as I put this down, I wrote my notes, I put it aside, and I picked up The Fires of Heaven, the next book in the series, immediately, so that I could read that first chapter, or the prologue in this case, and get right back into that world and see what had happened, because it left with so much that I wanted to know without it being like an intense cliffhanger. So it was really great. If you haven't read the Wheel of Time books, check them out. If you, I think most of you have though, maybe not. If you haven't, go check them out, and you can read them and watch my videos at the same time. So win-win for you. Next book that I read, picked this up on a whim. It was on sale at Kmart, I think. Kmart in Australia is awesome. I know it's not necessarily good in other countries that have Kmart, but Kmart is awesome. It will often have really great bargains. I think I picked this up for $10. The Hating Game, Sally Thorne. He's the one she loves to hate. It's very predictable, rom-com through and through. Like, nothing took me by surprise with this one, but I loved it. I thought it was exactly that holiday read that I needed. It did not require, I don't like saying this about a book because it was really good, I enjoyed it. Did not require much brain power on my behalf to read this book. I could picture it. Sally Thorne did a really great job of creating a world that I could just live, like I could just embrace. They're great characters. Lucy was fun, she was cute, and Joshua was that typical typical male lead character. Not much more to say about that. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it if you like that kind of thing, but it's not for everyone. The next book was this book I borrowed from my brother. Hi Michael, if you're watching. I'm going to hopefully return it to him tomorrow. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, biography, memoir type kind of things, but I do enjoy them when I do. This one was fun though. It was a comedian, James Acaster's classic Scrapes, as written by James Acaster himself. He's a UK, a British comic who I really enjoy. He's on a lot of the British panel shows. I think he co-hosts one called Hypothetical, but he's often on lots of different shows that I enjoy watching from the UK, and just good fun. They're supposedly, I assume, they're true stories from his life, and I do believe it. But just a lot of good fun. Had me laughing out loud in many moments, at least a couple of times every single chapter. And the kind of book that my brother loaned it to me because I was having trouble reading at the time, like just getting into anything, and he said, here, read this, read a chapter at a time. They're very episodic, so I could just, I think by the time I got halfway through, I just powered through and read the rest because it was so amazing. Exactly what I needed to be reading. So I would recommend it if you like British comedy, and if you've come across James Acaster at all, he's good fun. Talking about audiobooks next, I listened to 3 audiobooks in January. The first one was called Shielding Sierra by Susan Stoker and read by Virginia Rose. This was a romance novel. Susan Stoker is an author that I read most of her books. She's got this big world. They're romance novels, love stories, but they're all based around the military. So the man is off in some kind of special forces and falls in love with a woman. And it's exactly what it sounds. It's good fun and exactly the perfect kind of book to listen to as I'm going for a walk or out and about, just doing things, driving in the car, all that kind of stuff. And then after that, or around about the same time after that, I think I listened to Shielding Sierra, and then I moved on to what I always do in January, or always try and do, a Jane Austen story. I've read them all many times, but I always try and revisit one of Jane Austen's stories for Jane Austen January in my mind. That's a real thing. This time I read or listened to Sense and Sensibility, and it was read by Rosamund Pike, who I just adore her. She's just incredible. Ever since I've loved her ever since I saw her in Pride and Prejudice, the Hollywood Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley in it. Rosamund Pike played Jane Bennet, and she's just awesome. She's in Wheel of Time, obviously. Sense and Sensibility is great. I had forgotten. It's been a really long time since I've read Sense and Sensibility. Since I was at uni, I think. I did a subject on Jane Austen as part of my literature degree, or literature major, and I forgot how funny it was. I forgot how humorous these characters could be, and how much they were laughing at each other, and how much Jane Austen is laughing at these characters as well. And Rosamund Pike just captured their voices beautifully, and Jane Austen's voice perfectly. I can't imagine Jane Austen's voice read by anyone else, and I'm disappointed she's only read or narrated 2 books out of the 6 that Jane Austen wrote. I'm hoping that she might do more. Anyway, I would highly recommend that. I'm not going to say much. Sense and Sensibility is a classic, and it was ticking off one of my goals for this year, is to read 5 classics. And it was a reread. I'm still counting it. I might read 6, but I've ticked off 1, so that's awesome. And after I finished Sense and Sensibility, I moved on to a book. Yes, I've got the book as well, because I've had this book sitting there for, I reckon, 3 years. I think I bought this 3 years ago, and maybe 2 years. I've had it for quite some time, just sitting there, and I wasn't getting to it, so I thought I'll give the audiobook a try and see if that will help me get stuck into it, and I'm so glad I did. This is Terra Nullius, I've got the book as I said, by Claire G. Coleman, and read by Tamala Shelton and Mark Cole Smith. Now, Claire G. Coleman is an Aboriginal woman in Australia. This was her first book. I don't actually think she's written anything else yet. But it was nominated for the shortlisted for the Aurealis Awards, which are the Australian fantasy and sci-fi speculative fiction awards. It was also highly commended by the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards, Stella shortlisted. It's received a lot of shortlisted awards, and it's well worth it. Wow, this was amazing. I'm actually just going to read the back. I don't want to give away much about this, because I think what was so powerful when I read it was that I didn't know what to expect. I knew that it was at the it was at the Speculative Fiction Awards, and it was shortlisted for that. I knew that Claire Coleman is an Indigenous woman. I know that she writes stories about her people. So I knew that those things. Beyond that, this is all I knew from the back of the book. So Jackie was running. There was no thought in his head, only an intense drive to run. There was no sense he was getting anywhere, no plan, no destination, no future. All he had was a sense of what was behind, what he was running from. Jackie was running. The natives of the colony are restless. The settlers are eager to have a nation of peace and to bring the savages into line. Families are torn apart. Re-education is enforced. This rich land will provide for all. This is not Australia as we know it. This is not the Australia of our history. This Terra Nullius is something new, but all too familiar. So if you're Australian and you're watching this, this is a book that I think should be core reading for everyone. If you're from another country, I really think that you would get a lot out of this. It's got a lot of that colonial sort of feel. But as I have said, it's not Australia as you know it. Terra Nullius is basically saying that no people live here. That because when settlers arrived in Australia, they declared it as Terra Nullius. and that meant that the Aboriginal people were classified as fauna because they were saying no people live here. The people that they saw, the Aboriginal people, were classified as animals, and this book does reflect on that and what that means. And wow, yeah, I'm not going to even classify it any more than that. I'm not going to classify it genre wise. I'm not going to talk anymore. I think you should read this. Read it. And if you don't like it, let me know. But I really do think I will be shouting about this for a very long time because it was incredible to read. I just don't want to spoil it any more than that. So that's that. And the last book that I've read in January, and I just finished it. Today's February. I finished it this morning before I went to work. So I'm still counting it because I only had like 3 or 4 pages to go. Living on Stolen Land by Amberlynne, I should have practiced this, I'm sorry, Amberlynne Quamelina. It's a book. It's a book. Living on Stolen Land is a prose-style manifesto about our settler colonial present, and at once a call and a guide to action. This beautifully articulated declaration is a must-read for anyone interested in decolonising Australia. What I really liked about this is it was thought-provoking, as it said. It was challenging, thought-provoking, and empowering, and I really did think all of those things. I loved that this book challenged me. I loved that it explained things clearly. I loved that it allowed for different thoughts and different ideas, because that reflects the reality of Indigenous Australia, that there are different countries, different groups within Indigenous Australia. But I also really liked that it had hope. It called out behaviour, but it had hope as well. It's just beautiful. It's prose style. You are on Indigenous land, and then you are on Indigenous lands, swimming in Indigenous waters, looking up at Indigenous skies, and so on. So it was a quick read. I read it. I actually made the decision not to read it all in one sitting. I could have. I almost did. But I sat down and I broke it. It's broken into sections, and I read it over the course of a week. And I'm really, really glad I gave this a go. So highly recommend if you're Australian, or if not. This is another one that I'll be talking about. I read the 2 Australian books, Claire G. Coleman's Terra Nullius, and this one in honour of I don't want to call it Australia Day, Invasion Day, whatever you would like to call it. What is currently known as Australia Day is actually a day of great mourning for the Indigenous people in Australia. It is the day that it became a colony. It's the day that settlers came. It's the day that it started a major massacre in our country. And so I decided, as for Australia Day, instead of, you may have noticed I skipped posting a video on a certain day and posted it a day late. You might not, because my schedule's been a bit off anyway. But I just spent the entire day reading and looking into what it means to celebrate Australia Day on a day that is such a terrible day. Anyway, it's not the date to celebrate. Let's change the date, people in Australia. I think it's time that we celebrate Australia Day on a different day, considering it's not an old holiday, it's a new one. Sorry to get political. That's my view, and that's why I read so many Australian or 2. I only read 2, but I made a real point of doing that this year. Now, moving forward in February, my plans are I've got 2 audiobooks lined up. The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen, which I've actually read or listened to all but the last 2 hours of. I was listening to it back in October. Around the same time that I put down The Shadow Rising, I was listening to this as well. I had to put them both down because I was just getting too caught up with my studies. And The Bridge Kingdom is such a immersive fantasy story that I was getting too anxious about what was going on with the characters. So I couldn't sleep. So I put it down, but I'm going to finish that this month. It's only 2 hours to go, and probably start the sequel because it's a duology. And I'm also planning on listening to It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, which is a newer book I've read listened to. Actually, I listen to a lot of romance sort of rom-coms as audiobooks. Tessa Bailey's I think it's her latest, called It Happened One Summer. I'm also looking for suggestions. If you've stayed this long, some suggestions for later this month. It is Tell a Fairy Tale Day on the 26th of February. So I'm actually thinking that I'd like to look at a fairy tale retelling. So if you've got any favourites, let me know. I've got heaps. I've probably got some that I could read, but let me know if you've got any that you think I should check out. Just tell me down in the comments below. It's also National Library Lovers Month in February, so I'm going to visit the library and borrow a book from the library. So that's my sort of TBR, if you will. Plus the Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time, book 5, of course. So that's so far I've done my wrap up for January. I've done my very, very loose TBR for February. Now I'm just going to show you a couple of books that I bought recently. To start with though, I found this. I don't know if you watch any of my Wheel of Time videos. I don't have it sitting in front of me at the moment, but I have this beautiful notebook that I'm writing all my thoughts in, and I found a bookmark to match. So that's going to be my Wheel of Time bookmark. I love it. It's called Poetry in Motion is the design, and it's just gorgeous. So that's my new bookmark. I went to a secondhand bookshop earlier today and bought Twilight's Dawn, which I have read as an ebook, but I don't have the book, and Shalidor's Lady, both by Anne Bishop and both Black Jules novels. Haven't read Shalidor's Lady, have read the rest of the books. Love this world, and I'm looking forward to getting back into it. I may even reread some of them to just reacquaint myself. I also, earlier in the week, I bought this Amanda Gorman Poems Call Us What We Carry. I saw her poem at where most people would have seen her. She read her poem at Joe Biden's inauguration, and it was just absolutely stunning. Can't remember what that one was called. The Hills We Climb or something like that, and it was very, very powerful, and The Hill We Climb is what it's called. So I'm really looking forward to giving some of her other poetry. This has just come out fairly recently, I think, so yeah, I thought that would be fun. I've also bought this Raymond E. Feist, Magician. I'm looking forward to reading that. That's probably down the track quite a bit though. I don't want to read such a big one while I'm also reading The Wheel of Time. N.K. Jemisin, the 5th season. This will be part of my goals to read more female fantasy books, and by that I mean female adult fantasy books. The 5th season will tick one of those off, but I've also been wanting to read this for a while, so I thought that was a good opportunity to buy it. I'd like to reread this, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read this, Douglas Adams. I read this 4 or 5 years ago, and I'd like to reread it and check it out. I may have did I show you these already? Oh well. Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. I just think this cover is spectacular. Look at that. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's inspired by the legend of Chang'e, the moon goddess, and it's a debut novel about China that incorporates Chinese mythology. So this one will tick off one of my other goals. When I say I want to read 5 books from other cultures, this will be one of those. So that is my video for today. A little bit longer than I anticipated. Obviously I had a few things that I was talking about. But yeah, let me know. Have you read any of these books, or do you plan on reading any of these books? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you've got any suggestions for fairy tale retellings that you think I might enjoy, or you think that should be required reading, let me know that too, and I look forward to having a chat with you down in the comments below. Okay, bye.